r/nosleep. Posted by you/likeeyedid. If you live in my town you will never see your grandchildren grow up. I live in a very young town. By young of course I don't mean that it is new. No, our people have lived here for generations, simply not together. To someone from the outside, it might sound a little odd, and as we are quite the understanding bunch we get it. It is a strange concept, the one that has proven to be quite successful. No, the town itself is not young, but the inhabitants that get to live here are. The ones that get to live in a community of progress, fun, and of course a little bit of love. Not a single person in this place we call Milton is unemployed. There are opportunities for every single individual. Poverty does not exist, there is never a lack of food or drinks. Despite the small size of the town, we have a lively night scene, wonderful restaurants, and great bars. Hardly anyone is lonely, we are all peers in some way. Nobody is better than the other. Yes, some jobs might be a bit more powerful than others, but the ones who have them are often quite visionary. We retrieve our energy exclusively from renewable sources. Big pinwheels stand tall on the fields surrounding us. Behind the wheels, there isn't much more than a forest that we never cross, as behind it we would find the other place. We call it Sector B. There are two simple laws where we live, and when we abide by them we are allowed to live a fruitful life in a place that seems to be more advanced than the entire rest of the world, but not accessible for anyone that wasn't born on our ground. The first law is that you only live in Sector A until you have children of your own. If you reach a certain age and realize that children will not be part of your future, decide not to adopt either, then you move away. That part is an unspoken rule. Nobody will throw you over the gates, but if you don't add to the community then you won't find work, and buying a house will be rather difficult as well. It's the descriptive norm. Few leave but most want to stay. As I said, life here is as close to perfect as it can get. When you do decide to birth or raise a member of the next generation, then you only get to do so until they decide to have children of their own, or when they decide to leave the town. As I said, the latter occurs seldom. Partly because if they do, they don't get to come back. And we see what the world outside looks like. It's dark and cruel. It's stuck in times in too many ways. Progress is seen as something to be scared of, whereas here it is one of our core values. When you reach that certain age and the time has come for you to see your very own grandchild, you are asked to pack your bags and move to Sector B. If you happen to have multiple children, you wait for the last one. The second law is for Sectors A and B to never mix. When you leave the first chapter, you are bound to the second. Life in the other sector is just as lovely, only more relaxing. Resources from the young part are shared and therefore life is made even easier for them. It sounds like punishment, but it is a reward. You work hard to deserve that peace, even if you have to miss your kin for a while, they will come and join when the time has come. Some decide to have many children with large age gaps to ensure they will spend as much time with them as they can. Others have one when they are very young and hope the time will come soon so they can enjoy an early retirement. I come from a traditional family, or at least so I always thought. Ever since I was a teenager my parents preached to me how wonderful it is to have children of your own. To see a young soul look up to you and grow up to be its own human. Don't get me wrong, it does sound nice in many ways, but I never saw myself having children. I feel in many ways I can hardly take care of myself. You should have seen the look on my parents' faces when they found out that I had a girlfriend. A real serious relationship. I tried to hide it as long as I could because I knew exactly how they would react to the news and I was nowhere near ready for that kind of pressure. Keeping secrets in a town this small, however, is close to impossible, and when they finally heard the news about Fiona and me, they were thrilled. Possibly not entirely ecstatic, as her parents didn't have the best of reputations. They had 6 children and were continuing as long as they biologically could. You're not marrying the family, only the girl after all. It's fine, my mother said with a fake smile on her face. I rolled my eyes. Marrying? Geez, Mom, we're just dating. Who knows if it will even work out, was my response back then. Fiona was great and all, but I was young and planned on not settling down anytime soon. Maybe things wouldn't work out, maybe I'd date many more people. Back then I was a little cautious when it came to love, but the longer we were together, the more I started realizing that Fiona was the one. She was critical when it came to live here, well, not where we were but where we would be going one day. She couldn't imagine living with all those old people, I mean we weren't used to any. I told her that we would be old too then, but that didn't make the whole concept sound better to her. She was similar to her parents in that way. Back then I hadn't even told her that I wasn't planning on having children, although I believe we were in silent agreement when it came to that. We often joked about all the places we would visit if we ever got exiled. Unfortunately, life never goes as planned. My feelings were never as much in a muddle as one the day Fiona told me she was pregnant. We were sitting in the garden of her parents, watching her little brother play on the grass. We were alone and he was too young to understand why his sister was smiling and crying simultaneously. A child changes everything. Everywhere, but even more in Milton. Fiona's parents were happy for us. They would have time to see their grandchild for years before their youngest would reach the age. My mother and father were crying tears of joy at first. It was all they ever wanted. They were looking forward to the day they would be moved to Sector B all their life. Until the point when they laid eyes on their very own granddaughter and knew that they could never leave her voluntarily. If a child changes everything, so does a grandchild. The traditions were swiftly run overboard and the tears of joy turned into tears of fear. My parents were picked up on a Monday, in a van driven by Thomas Miller, who went to the same school as me. He was one of the few who was chosen to work for the town committee at a young age. Thomas had lost his parents as a young child. They died in an accident. When we were little he was almost like a brother to me. My mum made 2 sets of lunches for me to bring to school for years. As we grew older and Thomas was chosen to work for the committee, we had lost touch. Thomas stayed behind when the 2 officers got out of the car and made their way to our front door. Ours, as in Fiona and I, would now own the house. My father's hand was trembling when he opened the door. His eyes looked bloodshot. He hadn't slept 1 second last night. Mum didn't either. She held my daughter in her arms the whole night while holding my hand at the same time. I never believed that out of all people my mum wouldn't be ready to say goodbye. She loved the life she had in Sector A of Milton and couldn't wait for the next sector. Ever since they received the letter that told them they would be picked up soon, however, she spent every second fighting with my dad, who wasn't thrilled either but who was too scared to break any rules. "You wanted this," I overheard him say yesterday. "You wanted this life while you were young. You cannot change your mind now that you've grown out of it. Ben will come and live with us soon enough." I shuddered at this thought. There was no way in hell that I would ever leave my child and live in the next sector. I doubted very much that Fiona was into that idea either. In 2 decades? 3 or possibly even 4? What if our granddaughter decides to leave? Even if she doesn't, who knows if we will even be alive long enough to ever see her again? I didn't hear much more of their conversation, but Fiona and I talked as well, and we knew we never wanted to be in the place my parents were currently in, but now that we had brought a child to the grounds of Milton, there was no way for us to get out of it. I cried for the first time since I was a child when they guided my parents to the vehicle. They both tried to smile, but we all knew that this was not a happy day. I tried to talk to the officers, tell them that we needed them just a little longer to help with the child, but it was no use. "They are gonna love the next chapter, stay put boy," one of them hissed at me. The other pushed me back. If this was such a happy day, why were they being violent? My gut was screaming, and I tried to shout at them. I shouted at my parents that they can't leave and at those bastards that they couldn't just take them. My body started trembling so much and I thought I would throw up any second. This was wrong. This was just wrong, and these people were smiling. Smiling like shells with no emotion on the inside. Smiling gladly while taking my devastated parents away. Only Thomas looked serious. He was leaning on the side of the car, smoking a cigarette while avoiding eye contact entirely. It was an odd sight, as I had never in my life seen him smoking. At that moment I was distracted by much more important things, of course, but as they finally drove away and the only sound we could hear was my little girl crying, I noticed that Thomas had left something behind. A pack of cigarettes on the ground. Now seeing him smoke was a little unexpected, but throwing a pack of cigarettes on the ground was impossible. Nobody ever littered in Milton. Especially not someone working for the committee. If I didn't notice, or if it wasn't such a strange sight, maybe I would have continued my life in ignorance. But I did, and I picked it up before anyone else saw it. I don't know why, maybe it was just a gut feeling, but I went back to our home to open the package instead of throwing it away. There were no cigarettes inside, but something else. Polaroids. They weren't many and the quality was bad, but it was obvious what I was seeing on them. Dead bodies. Lifeless bodies hanging in a row, with cuts so they would be emptied of the blood. I even recognized a few faces. Neighbors that had welcomed grandchildren recently and were taken away to live in the other sector behind the forest. Only now I realized why our resources were so full, why we had so much, and why even the ones working for the committee were always young. I don't know brainwashed they were, but this seemed to be all right with them. I understood why we had so much. We were not sharing with the elderly. There was no perfect place for their retirement. When they finished doing their works, they were being disposed of. Maybe they were moving on to a better place, but it was certainly not Sector B.